Hey everybody, XEI here. Welcome back to XEI Reads Mass Effect Revelation by Drew Karpyshyn. We're on the fourth part here for the last couple patterns to go through, and I've done the unthinkable. I actually finished this book about a week and a half ago, and I didn't do this episode right away. So unfortunately what that means is I'm going to have to really dig deep into my memory. I'll have the scenes trigger as soon as I read the first one or two paragraphs of each chapter or each chapter break, stuff like that. I will quickly talk about the patterns that we're going to be encountering for this last quarter of the book here. The first one we're going to get straight into is one I call Final Showdown. And with Final Showdown, this is when everything comes together. Things from the B story come together. There's going to be a confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist, or however that dynamic plays out. And it's made up of three parts: Minion Madness, Secret Weapon, and All In. And I will talk about those as I hit the breakpoints determined by the pattern, the equation that I've come up with that seems to work across media and not just books. And the start of this new break is page 242, and based on the calculations here, on page 243-ish, the Minion Madness pattern begins. It's the first pattern of the Final Showdown, and here we have a scene between Dr. Shu Qian and Eden Heda, where they're talking about just like what's at stake at this point. Dr. Qian is basically panicking because he believes that the Alliance is on their tail, and they're going to intercept them and ruin all this research, all the time and effort he put into investigating this artifact is going to be lost if it gets taken from them. Eden's trying to tell this guy to calm down, and it's basically like, well, what are we going to do? My research is gone, my lab is destroyed. You know, just to rebuild this, it's going to be insane. We have a Spectre on our ass now. Like, how are we going to get ourselves out of this? Well, I got money, we'll figure it out. We'll just other partnerships, etc., etc. Dr. Qian says, well, there's one way we can basically kickstart this and get it moving a lot faster, because we have to start some of these scenes from scratch. And Eden says, well, what do you need? Well, I need Kaylee Sanders alive. And Eden sarcastically responds, well, you know, do you want me to ask her? Because I'm sure she'd love to just join us. And Dr. Qian's like, well, I didn't say anything about asking her, just take her. And the thing with Final Showdown, and why it was interesting that it appeared at the end of chapter 16, the fact that this small exchange between Eden and Dr. Qian really kicks off the pattern category of Final Showdown, because again, this is all about bringing those pieces together, and anything that's happened until then, bring it all together, because at this point you're gonna fire off into the end, and you need to have all the pieces in play, and there has to be perfect clarity about what every intention is on every player on the field at this point, so that as a reader, this is where you're basically summarizing and taking in all those inputs, because you need all those inputs to then string together what the rest of the last quarter of the book is going to be all about. Minion Madness is all about, it's the part of the story where if there are minions to face, if there's some sort of like smallish obstacles that the protagonist needs to face in order to get to the end, this is the point of the story that generally that happens. That this is when the hero has to confront all of these smaller challenges that escalate up towards the end. Now what we get here instead is, and we do get that a little bit later, so the pattern sort of spreads through this category, the Final Showdown category. So Minion Madness, the way that this is different, chapter 17 opens up with Ambassador Goyle going back to the Citadel Council, apologizing for what went down, again just being very political about it, as a way for humanity to show their good intentions, their contributions to Citadel space and to the Council. She's basically going there with an olive branch. Is that how you say it? An olive leaf? An olive branch? Anyways, not a show of peace, because the peace. Anyways, the point is, she goes there and says, we have something that details what went down at Sidon. We have information on Qian, and I was saying Dr. Quinn instead of Dr. Qian because autocorrect on my phone screwed up my spreadsheet when I typed up my notes, but the point is it's Dr. Qian. So she says, we have this information on Dr. Qian and how Qian's involved in the mental degradation that was going down because of this artifact. Yeah, she goes on to say that the files make mention of an unknown piece of alien technology discovered out beyond the borders of Citadel space. What kind of technology, they ask? We don't know. Obviously, it has some connection to synthetic intelligence, but beyond that, Kian was intentionally vague about the details. And then there's a suggestion here: is it Prothean? Not according to Kian's notes. And then talks about the degradation and possibly it's kind of unreliable, but it could possibly predate Prothean technology, and all of it is theirs in good faith. Take it, do what you will with it, and it's all good information, and they can share it among the races as needed in order to progress technology, in order to maybe confront something like this, like the Gats, etc., etc. The play here comes in, on page 254, which, based on my patterns, we're almost rolling into the pattern I call Secret Weapon. Before going into that, just to talk about the Minion Madness pattern and how it didn't really play out here, it is because mostly it's been focused on Goyle's kind of interplay with the council. So unless, you know, it's a bit of a stretch here, but unless you consider the council being the minions, and which is the politics are the minions, they have to kind of get over that hurdle. But for all intents and purposes, the pattern is all about the slide into what I call the Secret Weapon pattern, which is the second pattern of Final Showdown. And in this pattern, it's whatever was learned in the epiphany moment will be wielded, physically or metaphorically, as the final boss is confronted. So the secret weapon there then is that she used this data, she used this extra information to play the hand of, now give me something in return, let one of my humans shadow your Spectre and maybe be considered for the Spectre program as the first human Spectre. So there's a long tail plan here. Her play here is to get a human onto the Spectre program because they've only been part of the council for 10 years. That would be a massive win. That would make a statement, that would put a statement out there for the rest of the races that the humans aren't here to screw around. They don't need hundreds of years to prove themselves. They're ready to prove themselves now. So the secret weapon is literally like getting Anderson elevated to the rank of potential Spectre. That secret weapon pans out for the rest of the resolution here, which is, what does that mean? What will that mean from the Anderson point of view? He's being assessed by Saren, under what conditions, and it's really that adversarial point will kick off, like the final showdown element. That's what it's all about. It's about pitting these two forces against each other and then seeing how things shake out when they go into the third pattern, which is called All In. I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let's go through this chapter and see if I can trigger anything else here. Goyle gets to the end of this and she's like, she thinks she's like strolling out of there with a smile on her face because she's like, I totally got them. That was an awesome play. This is for the humans. There's a point she starts thinking like, but wait a minute. It's like the Asari didn't go on mute again to check the Turian and the Solarian to see if the approval was agreed upon by the other two members. The Asari just says, we've agreed that this is acceptable. And it only dawned on her that she didn't ask for the agreement of the other two. So that meant that they already knew what was going to go down. They knew what Goyle was going in for. They knew what Goyle was going to fight for. They already made their decision about whether or not they would allow it to pass or not. And basically, the chapter ends with Goyle realizing that she just got played. And even as good as she thinks she is, she still has stuff to learn by learning off of the masters behind the council. At the start of chapter 18, we have Kaylee Sanders with an entourage of Alliance Marines. The security detail was pulled together so that they could get her off of Kamala. It's for all intents and purposes a secret mission. Even from the Kaylee perspective, she has no idea what kind of concessions the Alliance had to make in order to get her off of Kamala, but she was thankful that it was happening, that she was going to be in the clear. And of course it ends with, hang on ma'am, we've got company, and some swerving and whatnot, and then we have a chapter break. And then after the break, we have, on a rocky outcropping several kilometers away, Saren could just make out against the glare of the setting sun the silhouette of the APC carrying First Lieutenant Kaylee Sanders. And Saren being Saren, he gets the mission update from the council about what's going down, the fact that they're going to extract Kaylee Sanders from the planet. And he was pissed because from the Saren perspective, if you remember the pattern called False Victory, which happened in chapter 2, so the end of the second episode of the series, I talk about the false victory and what that means. And what we got there is that Saren got the information that the AI program was going down, like he discovered all of that, and he was going to take that information to the council. That was going to ruin the credibility of the humans. Every reason for Saren to be convinced that he just ruined humanity's stake in all of this. that was the false victory, because of course the little win there is that Goyle took that around to the council after, used political methods to turn that around and turn it into that win. So the antagonist didn't actually have a victory. It was false because it gets turned around. That's what I meant, but it's hard to explain until the patterns play out and you see what it means based on these patterns. So we have the scenario now where Saren's pissed because, of course, in his head he's like, they should have been screwed. That, like, why are they extracting her now? And to rub salt in the wound, and now he has this damnable Lieutenant Anderson that he has to work with for the rest of the mission because of the agreement that the Alliance made with the Council to allow the humans to get Kian back at the end of this mission. So they have to collaborate, which Saren doesn't do very well. While reading this update, his anger actually gives way to curiosity, because although he knew that the Batarians were behind these shenanigans, what he didn't know was about the extraordinary alien technology that was referenced inside Dr. Kian's notes. And it quickly goes on to say Saren had always been intrigued by the sudden, unexplained disappearance of the Protheans. What kind of unimaginable string of events, what kind of catastrophic occurrence could cause an empire that spanned the known galaxy to vanish in less than a century? Virtually all traces of the Protheans had been wiped out. Only the mass relays in the Citadel survived the enduring legacy of a once great people. Hundreds of explanations had been put forward, yet these were all nothing but theories and speculation. The truth about the Prothean extinction was still a mystery, and this ancient alien technology could be one of the keys to unraveling it. And what he was able to deduct from Dr. Kian's notes was that what they likely found was an ancient ship orbiting a space station with AI capabilities to self-monitor and even repair all its vital systems without the need for organic caretakers like those found at the Citadel. What we have over the next page or two is a breakdown of the thought process that Saren went through. It also shows just the power of the Spectre at the end of the day to be able to do whatever they need to do in order to get something done. And it goes into, like, if he had to try to find Eden across this planet, like, it would take him forever. If he tried to find Dr. Kian, it would take forever. But what he did know is that Scar was still on the planet, and a way to unearth Scar was to conveniently ensure that the unscheduled Alliance landing on the desert was logged in the official government records, because he knew that they had spies everywhere, that Eden would have had spies in these places, and that as soon as that information hit, that information would get to Eden. Eden would then send Scar out in order to intercept, and Saren was right about everything. Eden had taken the bait, Scar had been sent, and so after the next page break, go back to the APC where the 5 soldiers are trying to keep control of this APC while it's getting shot at from Mercs. The Mercs are, of course, the Blue Suns with Scar. In kind of this moment of desperation, the driver pulls a 180 and then just plays chicken with one of the vehicles. Messes up one of the vehicles for sure, but it does spin out the APC and it topples over. So all the soldiers have to get out, and they have to get into formation to protect Sanders. Even as the Blue Sun vehicles are circling around them in order to flank them, they're closing in, they're putting on the pressure, and they're huddled around this overturned vehicle. They end up hearing the unmistakable sound of a space vessel's drive core engines burning up the atmosphere, and it's the Imogimo. It's their basically extraction plane to get Kaylee out of there. And what we get instead is a calm Scar walking back towards the Blue Suns, who are already quickly assembling a mass accelerator cannon, because of course he anticipated that this would happen, and so he launches this thing with multiple small explosive rounds. It's too much for the system, and the deadly projectiles obliterate the Yojima. So down it comes. Now it's like their one opportunity to get off the planet. It's now lost to them. It is burning and crashing down. No survivors. And now it's just the APC with the 5 Alliance soldiers and Kaylee Sanders. As Scar and the Blue Suns approach, Scar growls, "Throw down your weapons." After they get Kaylee Sanders, Scar says, "Kill them." And so they die, because that's the way Scar works. And so Saren sees all of this. The chapter ends with him watching the entire scene unfold, and as the Blue Suns drive off in the distance. Saren then jumps into his vehicle, which has been modified for stealth purposes. He just follows the glare until he gets to where he needs to get to, and really his goal is to find the facility that this is all going down in, and then he has to meet Anderson, because that's the next step. He has to pick up Anderson and they have to do the next phase together. And that kicks us off into chapter 19, page 275. We are definitely in the all-in pattern, and this is where the B story elements, they mix together with lessons learned. All of it is implied. Antagonist's defeat is hard but imminent. All in does sort of make sense. It totally fits in, because all in is about all of these pieces coming together, all of these B story elements coming together. Everything we've learned from now we have to retain. It's also about the protagonist and the antagonist coming to a head, and as readers, us understanding what the actual what's at stake, and how and what kind of arrangements need to be made in order to push forward. And in this case, we have chapter 19 opens off with Anderson talking to Goyle, actually, and asking finding out I got clearance, I am going to be shadowing, I'm going to be partnering with this maniac Saren. Are you sure this is going to play out in our favor? Is there a risk here? But then Goyle does tell him that personal information on Spectres is sealed, but that their intel did dig up something interesting. It seems that Saren had lost his brother during the First Contact War, and I'm highlighting this because it's sort of a statement that's said in passing, and because I finished reading this, there's nothing really that goes into why that statement was important for Anderson to learn at this point. It's sort of just floating out there. It gives you as a reader an understanding of why Saren might hate humans, he just holds this grudge. And I'm going to go offside here a little bit, but I've read the Evolution set of comic books, where you find out how Saren lost his brother. It's not exactly as it's said in here. I'm not entirely sure it was during the First Contact War at all, so I don't know if that's that the intel was manufactured to make it sound like this because it was covered up. I'll go into the breakdown of the Evolution set of comic books after this, but this is not what happens, so I'm not going to spoil it. Let's just wait for that series to pan out. I'll break it down in a similar fashion, see if it works out, and then we'll get into what that means. But anyway, so the lieutenant gets that information, and then he's off to meet Saren. He's in this dingy bar in this rundown neighborhood on the edges of Hattray, and Saren is late. He's about an hour late, and Anderson, of course, calls him on it. Saren's only response is, "I was working," because of course he was. He's a Spectre, and he doesn't have to say exactly what he was working on because he can do whatever the hell he wants. He's a Spectre. And Anderson gets right to the point, and he says, "Do I have to spend the rest of this mission looking over my shoulder?" Because rightfully so, Saren's a loose cannon. And Saren says, "I never kill someone without a reason." And if you recall, and this goes back to when I talked about mirror scenes that happen in patterns. If you remember, and this one's a beautiful one, because if you remember the first encounter between Saren and Anderson, do you remember what it was? Well, it was Anderson sitting across a kitchen table. Man, I wish I could find the line now. Control F. Hold on. So while sitting across each other at the kitchen table, I have two rules that I follow, Saren explained. The first is never kill someone without a reason. And the second, Anderson asked suspiciously, you can always find a reason to kill someone. Boom. Now, mirror scene. We have a scenario where I never kill someone without a reason, Saren reminded him, and Anderson counters, I thought you could always find a reason to kill someone. Little moments like that. I love them so much. But real quick, his response is, but now I have a very good reason to keep you alive, Saren answers. If you die, the Alliance will be crying out for my head, and the Council just might be inclined to give it to them. At the very least, they'd revoke my Spectre status. So really what we learn here is that Saren, he does have an allegiance to the Council. He does, I believe he does believe in his cause. But he also really admires his position of power. The fact that he can do whatever he deems necessary to get a job done. That amount of power and freedom is something that I believe is what really drives Saren at the end of the day, and so he wouldn't want to risk losing that. And Anderson says, so what are we going to do next? How are we going to find Eden? And Saren responds, I have already found him. They're at a bunker of an Ezo refinery. He even lays out the schematics on the table for Anderson to take a look at, and he says that he's already scouted the exterior. It's all just a bunch of worker camps, and if they wait until nightfall, they can sneak in pretty easily without alerting anyone. And Anderson's immediate concern is, well, sneak in and what, kill Eden? To which Saren responds, well, no, I would like to take him alive for interrogation purposes. They're to meet there again the following night before setting off. The chapter ends up breaking, and then it's Anderson talking with Goyle, and at this point he learns what went down with the interception on Kamala and that Kaylee did not get free. And because there was no way of anyone knowing that this extraction was going to happen, that this landing on the planet was going to happen, Anderson deducts very quickly that a leak must have happened. You know, at one point he even thinks that could it have been that Kaylee Sanders was right and there was no one you can trust, and that Goyle was maybe in on this. And he pushes that out of his mind real quick, but he's still determined. He's adamant to know, like, well, then how did it leak? Because it had to come from the inside. And she reminds him, like, you know, just remember what the mission is. The mission at the end of the day is for you to retrieve Dr. Kean. And then he asks, well, what about Lieutenant Sanders? And she says, well, we believe she's still alive. Hopefully if you find Kean, you'll find her. And the implication there being that his mission is Kean, and if he finds Kean, he needs to leave. That's his mission. Unfortunately, Kaylee would have to be left behind. At least that's the implication. It's not explicit, but that's what I took out of it. And then she says, like, you know, I shouldn't have to tell you how important this position is, how important, like, what Anderson is doing is to the humans and to the political move that Goyle went out of her way to create. And with that, Anderson just says, understood. He's fuming on the inside, but he's gonna be the soldier. He's gonna be the good soldier, just do what he's told. But deep down inside, and based on the beginning of this book, we know how it goes down with Anderson. Like, he doesn't leave people behind. Like, he was willing to put the giant lady, I forget her name now because it was a long time ago, they never came back up. And remember what I said is that if those characters do not get talked about when it's time to talk about the B story stuff, when it's time to start Act 2, if those characters don't come up again, they're not important. And that's the case. All of the original team from Anderson's history, not important. They never come up again. But in any case, what that did tell us is that the kind of character Anderson is. And so although he's saying yes to Goyle, like, he knows what his mission is, he knows what he's going to focus on, deep down, if he has the opportunity, he's not going to leave Kaylee behind. And so we have a page break, and it's him meeting Saren again at the diner before setting off. And right away, like, he's had time to stew on this, and he's put the pieces together, and he's like, you're the one who leaked the pickup. And Saren, of course, Saren being Saren, he'll just admit to it, because that's what Saren does. So he says, yeah, it was the only way. It would have taken months to find Eden, months we might not have. I don't have to explain myself to you. I saw an opportunity, so I took it. You son of a bitch, Anderson shouts, and he, like, lunges over the table to try to go for Saren. But Saren, man, too quick, spins around, grabs his wrist, twists it around his back, puts him on the ground. Sorry, Anderson, but you're cool, but not cooler than Saren. He's taken out. He's taken out of the picture, and although Anderson struggles for a few seconds, he realizes he's not getting out of this. He's not getting free, and at the end of the day, it's better that he just stops struggling before his arm actually breaks. And Saren whispers, this is what it means to be a Spectre. Sacrificing one life for the sake of millions. Kean's research is a threat to every species in Citadel space. I saw a chance to stop him at the cost of a few dozen lives. The math is simple, human, but few people are able to do it right. I get it, Anderson said, so let me up. Try this again and I will kill you. What we learn here is very, very important, actually, because despite Anderson being the best potential candidate for consideration into the Spectre program, he has a massive, major weakness, which is shown throughout this book. It's shown, in particular, they use Kaylee Sanders as the kind of catalyst to show us this, but the fact that he has, it's not that he has too much heart and so he's not a good candidate, but sort of. Like, his empathy gets in the way of him succeeding in anything equivalent to what a Spectre could be. Yes, you could probably be altruistic as a Spectre, but at the end of the day, Saren is right. And if you've watched my Let's Plays of Mass Effect, I think Joshua Karpyshyn gets right, which is sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta do what you gotta do, and you gotta put some of these feelings aside in order to do the math, man. And then you got because that's what being a Spectre is all about. If you can't do that, then be something else that's altruistic and meaningful. But you can't be a Spectre. Sometimes a Spectre needs to do what they got to do. So that was a big lesson learned right there that's going to carry on into the end of this book. Still asks, like, what do we do about Kaylee? If she's still alive, I want to be able to retrieve her. And Saren says that's not the mission. He just keeps reminding him that's not the mission. That's not the mission. That's not the mission I'm on, and you're shadowing me essentially. So you're on the mission I'm on, which is has nothing to do with Kaylee. But somehow Anderson still turns all this around because Anderson gives Saren a good opportunity here that actually feeds into Saren's plan. And so what he says is, you give me half an hour to go in before you, and I won't compromise anything. If anything, me going in early to try to find Kaylee, what I'll do is cause a distraction. So if I get discovered, the worst case scenario for Anderson is if he gets discovered, then what he sets up for Saren is he's caused a distraction. It just makes Saren's job easier to get to Kian because everyone's going to be sent to take out Anderson and Kaylee on their escape. So Saren actually agrees to this because Saren is a strategist at the end of the day, and he realized there is a benefit to having Anderson basically be a decoy, and one that might get killed in the process, which gets Saren the extra win, which is don't let the human get what they want at the end, just let the human fall. And so Saren agrees and says, if you get into trouble, I won't come to help you. Anderson says, I wouldn't expect you to. And Saren says, 30 minutes, not 1 second more. And that breaks into chapter 20. That gets us to page 287. We are now clear into the last category pattern of this book, which I call Ascension. And Ascension is when the hero defeats the antagonist, whatever it is, and its defeat allows a new world order to come about thanks to the hero. We'll see what that means. We'll see what that means for the last 40 pages or so of this book. The first pattern of the Ascension category is what I call the face-off. Face-off is when the hero confronts the antagonist head-on. The hero is confident and determined. That is exactly what we have here, because all that we have left in the plot at this point is Saren and Anderson have joined forces, not exactly because they want to, but because they have to, but they're going to make it work. Anderson does talk about the fact that since there are civilians walking around, like, he's got a little bit of a concern with accidentally getting civilians killed, and Saren very quickly says that shouldn't be a concern. Again, it goes back to that Spectre thing of sometimes casualties happen. Like, the mission needs to come first at all times. Saren's a little bit extreme in this case, but for all intents and purposes, Anderson worrying too much about this empathy is going to get in the way of things all the time. So Saren just reminds him, you know, at the end of the day, you just got to do what you got to do. And Anderson says, necessity is one thing, but how can you be so cold about killing innocent people? Practice. Lots of practice. Saren, you son of a bitch. Anyways, so they split up. Anderson goes off into the darkness and uses some bolt cutters to get through a fence. He sneaks in through the refinery. Still no one gets killed. He gets to a locker area and he finds a basket full of mechanics overalls, and so he puts on this clothing so that he can go undercover, and he pushes on into the facility without anyone really paying him any mind. So waiting on the outskirts of the work camp, Saren glanced at his watch. 15 minutes had passed. Anderson was no doubt somewhere deep inside the refinery by now, too far in to turn back, and with that, he'd waited long enough. It was time for his own mission to begin. So he gives him 15 minutes and then just says, nah, whatever, we're good. Screw. Because of course, from Saren's perspective, he's like, by that point, Saren's already going to put into action a sequence of events that is almost going to ensure that Anderson doesn't make it out alive, which we'll see very shortly. We've quickly turned back to Anderson once again. He's gotten to an area where there's 2 guards protecting another room, which he perceives at this point to be where they're possibly keeping Kaylee Sanders. He's trying to lie and say that he's down there to do some repairs. These guards say, we don't know anything about repairs. Anderson just replies he needs something from the equipment room, not this one, turn around. At that point, that's kind of the indication for Anderson, like that's the confirmation that like, no, this is probably where they're keeping Kaylee. Otherwise they wouldn't be trying, like they wouldn't be so keen on getting him to turn around. So of course, pew pew, and he takes out one of the guards. The other guard is confused because he's like, it was a silenced pistol, so he doesn't even know why the other guard has fallen down. And by that point, it's much too late, and he fires a shot between his eyes. And that gets us to chapter 21. This breaks into the second pattern of ascension, which I call Out with the Old. Based on page count right here, I got 297, 296. Pattern is almost dead on. And it's what the Out with the Old pattern is all about. This is when the antagonist is defeated and the old world is left behind, the new world is embraced and well defined. We turn to Saren's point of view at the beginning of chapter 21, where he's making his way through the westernmost front of the refinery, and he's just pinging people off as he's passing them. Pew, pew, pew. Doesn't matter who they are, they're getting killed. It's just a path of death all the way through. And while he's doing that, he's actually laying down explosives along the EZO, I don't know what they're called, but the liquid, the kind of the piping area, and basically things that are going to go boom when a boom goes off around them. Saren definitely went in there with a plan to make this thing light up and crumble down. Like nothing was going to survive his exit strategy, if you will. And with that, we switch back to Kaylee Sanders' point of view. She's in the closet. They're basically trying to break her down. They were going to do this for, she suspects they were going to do this for a couple days. They were going to, you know, starve her first, and then eventually that might escalate to it being physical torture until she broke down. And even she knows that with all the training she got, that, you know, at the end of the day, endless torture and abuse would likely lead to them getting whatever they wanted. It might take days, it might take weeks, but they'd likely win. So situation seemed pretty hopeless at this point, but then she heard something, a noise, a sound sweeter than the singing of angels, the sound of salvation, automatic gunfire on the other side of the door. And of course, this is Anderson kicking open the door that the other 2 mercs were protecting and entering this room, guns a-blazing, shooting crap all over the place, including Scar, which goes down in a stream of bullets. He's calling out, Kaylee, Kaylee, can you hear me? Here's a response. So he knows she's alive at least. He gets to the door. Hold on, I need to find the keys. And then of course he goes to the Krogan. And as we expected, Scar's eyes snap open and he takes Anderson by the neck, lifts him off the ground, and Anderson's like his legs are kicking and flailing, completely helpless, thinking impossible. Nobody could survive these kinds of injuries, not even a Krogan. No, dude, you saw how that worked the first time you encountered the Krogan. He took a couple rounds in the back and he got back up, and he still took Saren's bullets, and then he still got back up and jumped out of the window. Anderson, you should have known this. Empathy got in the way. You see what I mean? Blind. He could have just for sure finished him off. He could have just like emptied the entire clip in this Krogan, but he didn't. He went for Kaylee first. Anyways, now he's suffering for it, kicking and flailing, and then the Krogan says, you should be glad. You will have an easy death, not like the female. And then all of a sudden a massive explosion happens that shifts the ground from beneath Scar's feet, that allows Anderson to fall out of his grip. The alarms are now going off in this facility. Things are going haywire. Anderson is backed up into the corner. He switched the point of view to Kaylee Sanders, who is in the closet. She can hear all this commotion going down. So when the explosion went off, it sent Kaylee reeling across the room. She broke some teeth against the wall, but to her luck, she saw a light coming in from the edge of the door. So the door actually came slightly off of the hinges, which allowed her the opportunity to then smash through the door with her already damaged shoulder. So she ends up dislocating a shoulder when she crashes through the door. As Kaylee slams into the ground with her dislocated shoulder, she's like, her vision is still trying to assimilate to the scene because she's been in the darkness for so long that she's sort of she's just seeing white. She's like half blind, but she can hear Anderson screaming at her. Kaylee grabbed the gun, shoot because of course he's cornered at this point. He's gonna get screwed. And then acting on instinct, she pointed and pulled the trigger. She was rewarded with the unmistakable sound of a Krogan roaring in pain and the immense shadow fell away. Anderson comes crawling over right away to see if she's alright, to see if she can walk. She says that she thinks she dislocated his shoulder. Anderson apologizes, and then she says, for what? And then of course he grabs her wrist and her shoulder, pop! Just pops her shoulder back in place. She starts screaming, but at the end of the day, you know what? It could have been worse. So they get up. They take the assault rifles off of the dead men because they might need them, and off they go into the refinery in order to get to the rendezvous point and get the hell out of there. And that finishes the chapter and gets us into chapter 22. Explosions going off. Saren's already cleared past like the most dangerous part of the stuff that's going down, and he's making his way to where he knows where Dr. Kian and possibly Eden are holding out. We switch to the point of view of Kian. He's freaking out, of course. What are we doing? What are we waiting for? He's hysterical at this point. We have everything we need right here. Let's go. So he's trying to run off with the flash drives containing all the data. He's trying to get Eden to move, get Eden to get his men in here. Eden just says, no, not yet. We're waiting for the escort to arrive. Like, I'm not that crazy. If things are going haywire, it's because someone's after us. Like, something's coming for us, man. So we need to have our protection. And Kian's like, no, we need to leave now because this stuff is at risk. And Kian is like, well, what about them? You got 2 guards right there. Like, let's just leave with them. And Eden says, no, they're not enough. I'm not taking any chances. We wait for the rest of, and then his words are cut off by the sound of gunfire in the other room, and then a figure appears in the door. Your escort isn't gonna make it, the armored Turian said, and Eden instantly recognizes him. I know you, the Spectre, Saren. Eden says, he just says casually, are you gonna kill us now? Because Eden has now gotten to the point where he's realized he's gotten this far. He's gotten this far, and he's almost at peace with the fact that this is my end. This is how it's going to go down. He's going to go down with dignity because he's a Batarian, goddammit, and he's an Alpha Batarian. He's going to go down when he's ready to go down, and he's ready. If this is the moment, then he's going to go down. Saren does not kill them. Instead, he just asks, what were you working on at Sidon? And Kian shouts, nothing! It's ours! And he clutches this metal case to him, and Eden recognized the look on Saren's eye. He'd made his entire fortune off that look. Hunger, desire, the lust to possess. We know as players of Mass Effect 1 and 2 what that look is. That look might be the little weaving ins of indoctrination, maybe. We don't know. It's not explicitly stated. And so Eden makes a play. He understands that Saren wants what's in that case. He's about to be the businessman that he is, and he's gonna offer him a proposition. He's like, there's just enough, but you don't quite know everything. And Kian is still screaming at him. He's telling him to shut up because he's just gonna want the case. And Eden's like, no, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, he can get the case, but he doesn't have the knowledge. And the only way to use the knowledge that we have is if he has a way to understand it more quickly. And so there's this back and forth is happening where he's trying to sell his case, and so he says, well, without me, you'll never understand it, never figure out how to unlock its power. It's essential to the project. Saren raised the pistol and pointed it straight at the babbling human. And then Kian steps in and says, you need me. He assists at a rare moment of lucidity, like he's realizing, well, if his options are to let go of this briefcase or die and have it taken from him, well, then he's gonna let go of the briefcase, but at least make himself useful so he doesn't have to die and he can still be attached to this project that he's so eager to still be a part of, because of course indoctrination. And so he says, you need me, you need my research, my expertise. Without me, you'll never understand it, never figure out how to unlock its power. It's essential to the project. Saren raises his pistol and pointed it straight at the babbling man, and he turns his head towards Eden. Is this true? Eden shrugs. We have copies of all his research, and I have my own team studying the artifact. Kian is brilliant, but he's become erratic. I think the time has come for him to be replaced. So Eden plays his hand, and so no sooner were the words out of his mouth than Saren fired. Kian was rigid and toppled over backwards, a single bullet hole in his forehead. The metal case fell from his hands, clattered to the floor. Just like that, Saren made his decision. He took it. And what about you? Saren asks, aiming the pistol at the Batarian. Awesome scene. I know where it is. How will you find it without my help? And Saren nods his head in the direction of the metal case. There's probably something in there that'll tell me what I need to know. Think about how much time and effort I've put into this. So kill me and you'll have to start from scratch. You have no idea what this thing is capable of. It's like nothing the galaxy has ever seen before. Even with Kian's files, you won't just find anybody who can step in and resume work on the project. I've been involved from the beginning. I have a fundamental understanding of what we're dealing with. Nobody else in the galaxy can offer you that. If you kill me, you don't just lose my financial backing, you lose my experience. You might find someone else to fund the project, but that will take time. If you kill me, you'll be starting over from the beginning. You're not going to throw away 3 years of my groundwork just so you can have the satisfaction of shooting me. I don't mind waiting a few extra years. Saren replied as he squeezed the trigger. I'm a very patient man. God damn it, Saren. Anyways, and that gets us to page 310 and the final pattern called Resolution, which is about the hero accepting their place in the world. The setting is revised and establishes the changes to the new world order. And it starts based on the calculation on page 311. We're on page 310. And we switch the point of view to Kaylee and Anderson, and they're inside the building. This is, of course, the refinery is still blowing up around them, and they're on their way out. To keep moving, he shouts, "We'll never make it," Kaylee moans as she collapses to the ground, and with another explosion, Anderson turns around, sees everything on fire. He sees like these dark vapors crawling out of the windows, these chemical clouds released by the destruction. "Don't give up," Anderson shouted, grabbing her by the shoulder, hauling her to her feet. "We can make it." Kaylee only shook her head. Basically, she's given up. She's not going to go any further. "I can't. I'm too tired." And then, of course, this flashes back. This takes us back to the very beginning, right? Where we have the Anderson scene where he doesn't leave anyone behind. He's willing to take risks. There was an explosion there too. He took the, I forget her name. He takes her over his shoulder, and he carries her out of there. And in this paragraph actually says he couldn't carry her the rest of the way. They had too far to go, and with her draped over his back, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to move fast enough to get through the flame-engulfed work camp without them both burning to death. That's another mirror scene to an almost exact replica of the beginning scene to get out of Sidon, as it was also exploding, and they barely made it. And they only made it because the crew disobeyed the orders and stayed behind at the elevator so that they could get in and get out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it with her. They would have both died down there. And this is almost a flashback scene of like, where he's like, it doesn't go back to that moment, but from a narrative perspective, it's implied here that Anderson has learned since then that this is not a time to be a hero. Like, he needs to make a strategic decision here that either he needs to make it or he needs to get her up on her feet, and they both need to like get out of there as soldiers. He uses rank on her like based on the Systems Alliance military training, where you can just like with orders, you can just like your will just take over and get you through these things. And so he screams, so he shouts, "Damn it, Sanders! Don't you dare quit on me now. Your unit is moving out, so get up off your ass and get your feet moving. That's an order." And so, like a good soldier, Kaylee gets up and lets the willpower take over, and they both get the hell out of there, and they make it to the rendezvous point. To Saren's surprise, A, that he's made it back, B, that he's made it back with Kaylee Sanders, and then he just says, "Get in." So they get into the vehicle. "Where's Eden?" Anderson asks immediately. "Dead," is the only response. "What about Dr. Kian?" Kaylee wanted to know. "Him too." And with that, Saren slams on the gas, and they're the hell out of there, speeding away into the night, leaving a grim scene of death and destruction farther and farther behind them. And nothing else is said about it. And so we end up in the epilogue. This is the closing of the book. We start off with Anderson and Kaylee at the Citadel. They're in the Presidium. They're basically saying their goodbyes, their farewells. And she starts off by asking, well, what did the ambassadors say? Well, as much as what could be expected. The council had rejected him as a candidate for the Spectres. "Because Saren screwed you," she said, disgusted. "His reports doesn't paint a very flattering portrait of me," he says. "I ignored the true goal of the mission. Claims I blew his cover by tipping off the mercs inside the base by going in too soon. He even manages to blame me for the explosions." So although they know it's all lies, at the end of the day, it was enough truth mixed in with it all, and they just let it go. And then from the perspective of what did the council find on Kaylee's disc, the one that talked about the alien artifact, well, as what can be expected if the games are to show us anything, is that the council, of course, it was all theory and conjecture. They don't believe there ever was any alien technology. Like, what a band of morons, man. Okay, what about all the research he had us doing? She protested. What was he trying to accomplish? They say Kian was unstable. They think he conned Eden with wild claims and false promises based on his own psychotic delusions. And they think he was just dragging the entire Sidon project deeper and deeper into his own private madness. Just a fascinating group of people looking over the well-being of the galaxy, huh? Anyways, so let me not get into my personal biases of the council. And then David actually makes a play here. He goes in for a kiss, which ties together, like, he had an attraction to Kaylee. And it's also presented that Kaylee also had considerations for the possibility of being with Anderson. But as soon as they kiss, she pulls back and she says, "No, David, we can't do this. I'm sorry." She brings up the fact that they're both military people. It's not going to work. It's, you know, she's gotten offered a new position that's going to have her move away again. And at the end of the day, he's a good man, but it's just not going to work. So they say goodbye, and then we flip to Saren's perspective, which is the last one of this book. We know where this is all going to go because this needs to be the cliffhanger that leads into Mass Effect 1. And we have, in the privacy of his small one-man craft, Saren had been studying the data on the flash drive inside Kian's metal case for hours. His suspicions had been correct. The alien technology was a vessel of some sort. It was called Soaring, a magnificent relic from the time of the Prothean extinction, an enormous warship of tremendous power. As he's like working out the complexity and the grandeur of this potential technology, that it dwarfs the Citadel even, he starts thinking to himself like he spent his entire life preparing for a moment like this. Everything he'd ever done, his military service, his career with the Spectres, was only a prelude to this revelation. Boom, name of the book, right at the end. Now he had found his true purpose. Destiny had led him here. He's content with himself about how the Alliance had been publicly humiliated. The Council was convinced that the artifact didn't even exist. So he's a man alone here to doing whatever the hell he wants because he's a Spectre, so he doesn't even have anyone watching over him. He doesn't have to report in, doesn't have to say anything about what he's up to. All of what happened at the beginning of Mass Effect 1 was legitimate, like it was a legitimate concern, but they sided with Saren anyways, and they had all this information already, which is just, it's absurd to me to think about. The deeper I think about it, the more angry I get with the Council. Kian's notes did paint him as, he was obviously a brilliant scientist. Saren understood the fundamentals behind the principles of the AI technology, but it was clear that the human's research was far beyond anything he could ever hope to grasp. So it would take him a while, but he had this information. And of course, Saren also hypothesizes that being close to this thing called the Sovereign was what escalated the progression into dementia and the deterioration of the mental state of Dr. Kian, and even goes on to say that it had affected Eden too. Though the transformation was more stable, the Batarian had begun acting differently from the moment he first visited the site of the artifact, consorting with humans, risking the wrath of the Spectres. Eden probably hadn't even been aware of the changes, though looking back, it was obvious to Saren. So it's funny that Saren's he's hypothesizing this and he's putting all these things together, but he himself has the arrogance, has the audacity to think that it won't affect him. And Saren takes it a step further because Saren's plan is to get to the Sovereign and then use the Sovereign to bend the Geth's will to his purpose. And the dangers were great, he does acknowledge that, but that the potential rewards were worth the risk. He'd just be patient, cautious, he'd move slowly. It would take years, maybe decades. But the secrets of the alien vessel, all its power, would one day be his to command. And the resolution pattern is all about something in the setting being revisited and establishing changes to the New World Order. And we have it right here on the last page, last paragraph, which explicitly says that once that power is unleashed, everything would be forever changed. At long last, there would be a reckoning for the Alliance. Humanity would learn its place, along with every other species that paid homage to the Citadel, and Sovereign was the key to all of that. I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the structure of the book. The pacing of the book was pretty strong. For all the pieces moving at the same time, that's really tricky to do, but the fact that Drew Karpyshyn could get all those pieces moving at the same time and have all of it pan out perfectly to really get you to that end where everything felt like it connected correctly, it was a talent. It was well manufactured, and it was quick paced. It was quick paced. I flew through this. I probably read this in 4 sessions essentially. I just didn't get to these videos as fast as I could have, but I got through the book in about, well, 4 cigars worth. So there you go. That's telling. It was a pretty awesome read. So I'm looking forward to Ascension, which is the next book. That's going to be the next series. So by Drew Karpyshyn. All 3 of these books are by Drew Karpyshyn. They're the only ones you need to read. There's a 4th book out there. Ignore it at all costs. The reviews tell you so. And I rarely ever listen to reviews. I get books anyways. But in this case, I think I just got too much to read already, and I just want to play the game, Mass Effect 3. So I'm going to leave it behind. Wraps up this series. I'm looking forward to doing Ascension next. I'll do it in another 4-part series where I'll use the narrative patterns framework as talking points through the series, and I'll also be getting through the graphic novels. As you can see, one of them is missing off my stack here because I've already started reading it, so those will come to the channel very soon as well. I hope you enjoy these. Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire, buddy. I'll catch you in the next Mass Effect session. Bye bye.